Tiana Brooks noticed the first man because he did not look at the menu. She noticed the fifth because he made the same mistake. Inside the Blue Lantern, a low-lit jazz restaurant in New Orleans where brass lamps glowed like old coins and a saxophone filled the room with honeyed sorrow, most people saw nothing unusual. They saw 5 well-dressed men arriving separately, each with polished shoes, quiet voices, and the easy confidence of men who expected doors to open before they touched them. Tiana saw timing. The first arrived at 8:12 and asked the hostess for a table near the music. The second arrived 4 minutes later and used the exact same phrase. By the time the fifth man stepped through the front door, adjusted his dark cuff, and repeated, "Table near the music, if possible," Tiana's hand had already tightened around the water pitcher. She was 30 years old, a black woman who had been called too intense so many times that she had learned to hide intelligence behind courtesy. At the Blue Lantern, guests praised her memory when she remembered their wine preferences, but management called it attitude when she remembered who lied. Grant Mercer, the restaurant manager, hated that most about her. He wanted servers who smiled, nodded, and disappeared into the velvet shadows after placing plates on white linen. Tiana did not disappear easily, not because she was loud, because she noticed. She noticed when the men sat apart, but chose angles with clear views of the corner booth. She noticed that none of them opened the menu. She noticed they all ordered water without ice, in a restaurant famous for cocktails. She noticed that 2 kept their coats on though the room was warm from bodies, candles, and brass stage lights. And she noticed Grant Mercer crossing the floor more often than usual, touching the reservation tablet, glancing toward the hallway camera, then looking away too quickly. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below if you believe courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to speak when silence feels safer. Now, back to Tiana Brooks, carrying a tray through a room that had already decided she was only there to serve. At 8:29, Adrian Whitlock entered. The music did not stop, but the room seemed to lower its voice around him. He was a white Mafia Boss wrapped in a navy suit and a pale dress shirt, tall, still, and unreadable, with a reputation that moved ahead of him like a weather warning. He came with a lawyer, an investment representative, and the kind of silence that made confident men reconsider their volume. Tiana had served him once before. He had remembered her name, tipped properly, and spoken to her as if she were part of the room instead of furniture inside it. That mattered. Small respect always did. Tonight, Adrian took the corner booth beneath the blue glass lantern, exactly where every strange man could see him. Grant immediately waved Tiana over. "VIP section," he said under his breath. "And do not overthink tonight. Just smile and pour." His tone was light, but his eyes were not. Tiana looked past him toward the 5 men, then toward the hallway camera above the service entrance. Its small red light was off. Her pulse moved faster, but her face stayed calm. Grant leaned closer. "You have a problem?" Tiana lifted the pitcher, her voice even. "No, Mr. Mercer." But that was the first lie she had told all night. Because everyone else heard jazz, silverware, and laughter, Tiana heard a pattern tightening around the most dangerous man in the room. Tiana Brooks moved toward the VIP section with the water pitcher in her right hand and a smile practiced enough to survive inspection. The Blue Lantern shimmered around her, all velvet booths, polished brass, and candlelight sliding across dark wood, but beneath the music, she could feel the room becoming uneven. Adrian Whitlock sat beneath the blue glass lantern with his lawyer to his left and an investment representative across from him, his pale face calm, his navy suit immaculate, his attention appearing relaxed to anyone who did not understand dangerous stillness. He did not look like a man waiting for trouble. He looked like a man who had spent a lifetime making trouble reveal itself first. Tiana filled his glass without spilling a drop. "Good evening, Miss Brooks," Adrian said quietly. The sound of her name almost made her hand pause. Most powerful men remembered orders, not people. "Good evening, sir," she answered. His eyes lifted to hers for only a second, but in that second she knew he had noticed her noticing. That frightened her, because being seen by a man like Adrian could be protection or danger, depending on what truth came next. Grant Mercer passed behind her and brushed 2 fingers against the back of an empty chair, a gesture so small it could have been nothing. At table 4, one of the 5 men shifted his water glass closer to the edge. At table 7, another checked his watch. At the bar, the third turned his body halfway toward the service hallway. Tiana saw it all, and her pulse pressed against her throat. "Everything all right?" Adrian asked, still not moving. Tiana heard the lawyer stop speaking. The question was casual. The silence around it was not. Before she could answer, Grant appeared at her side like a curtain pulled too fast. "Of course," he said brightly. "Tiana just gets nervous around high-profile guests." The words were wrapped in a smile and dipped in insult. Adrian's gaze remained on Tiana. Grant continued, "She is one of our more observant servers. Sometimes too observant." A few guests nearby chuckled politely, the way people laugh when they are not sure whether cruelty is part of the service. Tiana kept her face still. Too observant. Too intense. Too suspicious. Too black to be sharp without making someone uncomfortable. She had heard versions of it since school, since the criminal justice classes she had left behind when her father's stroke turned textbooks into hospital bills. Back then, professors praised pattern recognition. At the Blue Lantern, Grant called it a problem. "I only want the guests taken care of," Tiana said. Grant leaned closer, his voice low enough to sound private, but clear enough to bruise. "Then do your job. Do not invent danger to feel important." The pitcher felt suddenly heavy in her hand. Across the dining room, Evelyn Hart, a society guest with silver hair and diamonds at her throat, looked up from her table. "Some people confuse anxiety with intelligence," she said, loud enough for her friends to hear. Laughter followed, soft and expensive. Tiana did not look at her. She looked at the hallway camera again. Still dark. She looked at the reservation tablet near the host's stand, where Grant had moved table assignments 20 minutes earlier. She looked at the 5 men, none eating, none talking, all waiting. Her fear was real. It moved through her hands, her ribs, the back of her neck. But her memory stayed clean. First man, 8:12, blue tie, table near the music. Second man, 8:16, no ice, table 7. Third man, 8:21, coat on, asked about the back hallway. Fourth man, 8:25, sat near the kitchen sight line. Fifth man, 8:27, repeated the same phrase as the first. Grant wanted her embarrassed. He wanted her quiet. He wanted the room to see a dramatic waitress instead of a witness. Tiana stepped back from Adrian's table, still carrying the pitcher, and gave Grant the smile he had trained into her. "Yes, Mr. Mercer." But as she turned toward the service station, she folded one white napkin into a narrow triangle and placed it beneath Adrian's glass, the old house signal for an allergy warning that required manager attention. Adrian's eyes dropped to it. His expression did not change. Only his hand still beside the glass. Tiana walked away without looking back. The saxophone bent into a low blue note. The 5 men waited. And for the first time that night, so did Adrian Whitlock. The folded napkin sat beneath Adrian Whitlock's glass like a small white flag that meant the opposite of surrender. Tiana Brooks had placed it carefully, then walked away with the water pitcher in her hand and fear hidden behind her practiced service smile. She did not turn back, because turning back would tell Grant Mercer she had done something. Instead, she crossed toward the service station, lifted a stack of side plates, and let the mirror behind the bar show her what her eyes could not. Adrian had seen the signal. He had not touched the napkin. He had only shifted his gaze once, from the glass to the hallway camera, then to Rebecca Shaw, the lawyer seated beside him. Rebecca was a woman in her 40s with a black blazer, silver earrings, and the calm expression of someone who made chaos introduce itself by its full name before she answered it. She followed Adrian's glance, saw the dark camera light, and reached for her phone beneath the table. Tiana felt one breath leave her body. Not relief. Not yet. Relief was for people who knew they would be believed. Grant moved toward her before she could set down the plates. "What did you put under his glass?" he asked. His voice stayed low, but his smile had disappeared completely. Tiana stacked the plates slowly. "A napkin. Do not get smart with me." She looked at him then, and for a second the restaurant around them faded into candlelight and brass and velvet shadow. "I was not aware napkins required permission." His eyes hardened. "You think you are clever because you took some classes once. Let me remind you where you are. You are a waitress. You carry drinks. You do not run security. You do not read guests. You do not make men like Adrian Whitlock nervous because you want attention." The words were quiet enough to avoid the guests and cruel enough to reach every place he meant them to reach. Tiana thought of her father's pill organizer on the kitchen counter, each compartment labeled by day, each refill costing more than she had expected. She thought of the criminal justice textbooks still boxed in her closet, their pages filled with notes about probable cause, patterns, intent, documentation. She had not stopped being smart when she left school. She had simply stopped being applauded for it. Evelyn Hart looked over again from her table, the diamonds at her throat catching blue stage light. "Is there a problem with the staff tonight, Grant?" she asked. Grant turned with a polished laugh. "Nothing serious." Tiana gets overwhelmed. Tiana heard the trap closing. Overwhelmed meant emotional. Emotional meant unreliable. Unreliable meant silent. At table 7, the man with no ice water raised 2 fingers to the man near the bar, a signal disguised as a stretch. At table 4, the man in the blue tie shifted his chair 3 inches closer to the aisle. Tiana's hands trembled once around the plates. Her memory did not. Adrian stood then. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. He simply rose from the corner booth, and the room adjusted to him the way water adjusts around stone. He did not look at the 5 men. He looked at Grant. "Manager," he said. Grant stepped forward too quickly. "Mr. Whitlock, I apologize. Your server seems to have misunderstood our service protocol." Adrian's pale face remained unreadable. "Then explain the protocol." Grant blinked. "Excuse me." Rebecca Shaw stood beside Adrian, phone in hand, voice smooth. "Specifically, explain why your hallway camera is inactive during VIP service, why the reservation chart was edited after 8 o'clock, and why Miss Brooks was assigned to this section immediately after those edits." The saxophone continued playing, but every note seemed farther away. Grant's face changed, only for half a second, but Tiana saw it. So did Adrian. So did Rebecca. Adrian finally turned his eyes to Tiana. He did not ask her to defend herself in front of people who wanted her small. He asked one clean question. "Miss Brooks, what did you see?" The room waited for her to shrink. Tiana set the plates down, lifted her chin, and answered like the student she had once been, the witness she had become, and the woman they had mistaken for invisible. 5 men came in separately, used the same seating phrase, ordered the same drink, watched your table from 5 angles, and looked at Mr. Mercer before they looked at the menu. The room went still. Grant whispered her name like a warning. Tiana did not stop, and he made sure I would be standing closest when the room started asking who failed to notice. Adrian's eyes went cold, not with surprise, but with recognition. The real threat had just stepped out from behind the music. Grant Mercer looked at Tiana Brooks, as if her calm voice had offended him more than any accusation could have. Around them, the blue lantern held its breath beneath brass lamps and blue smoke-colored light, while the saxophone softened into a slow, uneasy melody. Guests who had spent the evening treating servers like moving furniture now watched a black woman in a white apron describe the room more accurately than the people paid to control it. Grant forced a laugh that arrived too late to sound natural. "This is ridiculous," he said. "She is connecting random details because she wants to feel important." Evelyn Hart gave a faint nod from her table, grateful for a familiar explanation. "That does happen," she murmured. "Some people see patterns where there are only nerves." Tiana felt the insult land, but it no longer entered her. There was a difference between being dismissed and believing the dismissal. She had crossed that difference the moment Adrian Whitlock asked what she saw. Adrian did not look at Evelyn. He did not look at the 5 men. He looked at Rebecca Shaw. "Preserve everything." Rebecca's fingers moved across her phone. Notices being sent now. Reservation logs, staff assignments, camera status, point of sale activity, internal messages, and entry timestamps. Grant's expression tightened. "You cannot just seize private business records." Rebecca lifted her eyes. "No one is seizing anything. We are instructing preservation because your own conduct created a material safety concern during a pending investment review." The phrase settled over the room like a legal signature. Pending investment review. Tiana saw Grant understand, and the understanding stripped color from his face. Adrian had not come only for dinner. The Blue Lantern was being evaluated by people with money, lawyers, contracts, and enough influence to make a manager's secret stop looking private. One of the 5 men near the bar shifted toward the side hallway, then stopped when Adrian's investment representative quietly rose and stood near the aisle with his phone already open. No confrontation, no scene, just positioning, witness, documentation. Adrian's power did not need volume. It changed the choices available to everyone else. Grant turned back to Tiana, abandoning polish for pressure. Tell them exactly what you think you saw. Go on. Explain how a waitress became an expert in security. Tiana's fingers curled once against the empty tray, then relaxed. Her father used to tell her that panic was information arriving too fast. Slow it down, baby girl, he would say from his recliner after physical therapy, and the truth will show you its edges. She slowed it down now. At 8:12, the first man asked for table near the music, if possible. At 8:16, the second man used the same phrase. At 8:21, the third man asked whether the back hallway connected to the restrooms, even though the restroom sign is visible from the host's stand. At 8:25, the fourth man declined a menu but asked who controlled the lights on stage. At 8:27, the fifth man repeated the first phrase and sat where he could see both the VIP booth and the service exit. No one laughed this time. Even Evelyn's chin lowered slightly. Tiana continued, her voice quiet enough to make everyone lean in. None of them ordered food. All 5 asked for water without ice. 3 watched Mr. Mercer before looking at their own tables. The hallway camera was active at 7:50 when I started my shift. It was off by 8:10. Rebecca looked toward Peter, the assistant host standing frozen beside the tablet. Can you confirm the camera status changed at 8:10? Peter's throat moved. He looked at Grant, then at Tiana, then at Adrian. Yes, he whispered. Maintenance mode was entered from the manager profile. The room went silent. Grant stepped toward Peter. Careful. Adrian's voice cut in, low and final. No. You be careful. The words did not threaten. They warned him that the room had witnesses now. Peter straightened a little. The reservation chart was edited too, he said, barely above a whisper. Miss Brooks was moved to VIP after the camera went down. Tiana felt the floor steady beneath her. Not because she was safe, not yet, but because the truth had found another voice. The 5 men were still seated around the restaurant, still pretending to be guests, but the pretending had begun to decay. One checked his phone. Another stared at the exit sign. A third placed his untouched water glass farther from the table edge, as if distance could erase intention. Adrian looked at Tiana, and for the first time his cold expression carried something like respect. You were right, he said. Grant tried one more smile, brittle and desperate. Or she got lucky. Tiana turned to him. The tray in her hand no longer felt like a servant's tool. It felt like a line she had carried through the room without letting it bend. Luck does not remember timestamps, she said. The saxophone stopped at the end of the song, and the silence that followed belonged to her. Grant Mercer understood that he could no longer erase the pattern, so he tried to erase the person who had named it. His face softened into the expression managers use when cruelty needs a witness-friendly costume. Tiana, he said, almost gently, I know you have been under pressure. Your father's health, your bills, the classes you had to leave behind. Nobody here is judging you for being stressed. The words slipped through the blue lantern with polished sympathy, but Tiana felt every hook hidden inside them. He was not comforting her. He was building a box around her credibility and labeling it personal struggle. Evelyn Hart leaned back with the satisfied sadness of someone who preferred prejudice when it sounded compassionate. That explains quite a bit, she said. Tiana's chest tightened, but she kept her shoulders level. There were humiliations that shouted and humiliations that whispered your private life in public so strangers could decide your pain made you unreliable. Grant took another step, careful not to look aggressive, careful to look like the reasonable man in a room full of uncertainty. You are a good server when you stay focused. But tonight you have made accusations against guests, against me, against this establishment. Do you understand what that could do to your job? There it was. Not a threat. Not in language anyone could quote. A reminder. The kind that turned rent into a leash and medicine into a gag. Tiana thought of her father asleep in the apartment on Esplanade Avenue, the television flickering blue across his blanket, his right hand still stubbornly practicing the exercises his therapist gave him. She thought of the tuition envelope for the night course she kept promising herself she would finish. She thought of every time Grant had said, "Be grateful," as if gratitude meant accepting a smaller life. Adrian Whitlock remained near his booth, silent and still, but the room had learned by now that his silence was never absence. Rebecca Shaw stood beside him with her phone in one hand and a legal notice already sent. The investment representative had moved near the host's stand, speaking quietly to someone on a secure line. No one touched the 5 men. No one cornered them. Yet every exit had become watched by staff, cameras, and attention. The danger had not exploded because Tiana had slowed it down and made it visible. Grant turned toward Adrian, voice smooth again. "Mr. Whitlock, I apologize for the disruption. We can comp your table and handle this internally." Adrian's pale eyes did not move from him. "You lost the right to handle her internally when you tried to make her honesty look like instability." The sentence landed with such calm force that even Evelyn looked away. Grant's jaw flexed. "You do not know her history." Tiana stepped forward before Adrian could answer. Her hands trembled. Her voice did not. "My history is not the issue. The reservation edits are. The camera status is. The seating pattern is. The fact that you assigned me to stand closest to Mr. Whitlock after changing all 3 is." Grant opened his mouth, but she continued, each word placed carefully, like evidence on a table. "At 8:06, you told Marissa at the host stand to take her break early. At 8:10, the hallway camera went into maintenance mode. At 8:18, you changed my section. At 8:23, you told me not to overthink tonight. And at 8:31, when I signaled the VIP table, you asked what I put under his glass before anyone else noticed it." Peter, still by the host's stand, looked at the tablet and whispered, "Those times match." The room shifted toward Tiana, not with pity now, but belief. Grant's eyes sharpened. "You have been watching me?" Tiana met his stare. "No, Mr. Mercer. I have been working here. You just never thought working people were paying attention." Adrian's expression changed by almost nothing, but the entire restaurant seemed to feel his approval. He turned to Rebecca. "Lock the staff assignment sheet and export the reservation history." Rebecca nodded. "Already in progress. I am also requesting the third-party camera backup and the building access log." Grant's confidence cracked wide enough for everyone to see. "You cannot involve outside systems without ownership authorization." Adrian adjusted one cuff, revealing the faint edge of a tattoo at his wrist. "The ownership group authorized my review at 6 this evening." He looked toward the 5 men, then back at Grant. "You were not caught by force. You were caught by paperwork." A murmur moved through the dining room. The 5 men who had seemed composed minutes ago now looked like businessmen waiting for a meeting they regretted attending. One placed his phone face down. Another folded his hands too tightly on the table. The mask of ordinary guests had begun to slip, not through violence, but through the unbearable pressure of being accurately observed. Evelyn's voice came smaller this time. Perhaps the young woman should be allowed to finish explaining. Tiana glanced at her, and the irony almost hurt. Respect often arrived late and dressed as permission. She did not need it. She turned back to Adrian. "There is one more thing," she said. "The same man at table 7 asked me twice whether the band takes a break before closing. But the band schedule is not posted for guests." Rebecca looked up sharply. Adrian's face went colder. Grant stopped breathing for half a second. Tiana saw it, and so did everyone else who had finally learned to watch what she watched. The room went silent, and this time Grant Mercer was the one standing in it without a place to hide. Tiana Brooks had spent the entire night being treated like a nervous waitress with an overactive imagination, but by the time she mentioned the band schedule, every person inside the Blue Lantern understood that her mind had been building a map no one else could see. The saxophone player stood near the edge of the stage with his instrument lowered, watching her the way guests usually watch the performers. Grant Mercer's face had gone tight and colorless beneath the blue-gold lamps. "The band schedule is common knowledge," he said, but the sentence fell apart before it reached the floor. Rebecca Shaw looked to the stage manager, a thin man in a black vest who had been silent all evening. "Is the break schedule visible to guests?" He shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am. We keep it in the staff binder and the manager tablet." Tiana nodded, not triumphant, not dramatic, only precise. "The man at table 7 asked about it twice. The first time was when I passed with water. The second time was after Mr. Mercer came back from the host stand. He asked if the band usually stops before 11, but the band was not scheduled to stop until 11:15. The investment representative at the aisle lowered his phone slightly. "That matters because the band break changes the noise level and clears the stage path." Tiana turned toward him. And because the hallway camera faces the stage path when it is working, the words settled into place like the final piece of a lock. Guests who had dismissed her minutes earlier now leaned forward, not because they wanted gossip, but because they could feel intelligence reorganizing the room. Tiana walked to the host's stand, keeping both hands visible, keeping her steps measured, refusing to let anyone mistake urgency for panic. "Peter, may I see the printed reservation sheet from before the edits?" Peter looked at Grant, then looked away from him for the first time all night. "Yes." He pulled a folded sheet from beneath the tablet stand. Tiana took it with care and placed it on the nearest table beside the current seating chart Rebecca had exported. "Original chart," she said. Mr. Whitlock was seated at the corner booth with a clear view of the front entrance. Revised chart, after 8:10, moves Table 7 beside the stage path, Table 4 near the service exit, and Table 11 near the hallway. Rebecca compared the pages. "And your section?" Tiana pointed. "Changed from back dining to VIP at 8:18. Adrian Whitlock said nothing, but his pale eyes followed every movement. He was not rescuing her now. He was witnessing her work. That mattered more. Grant forced a laugh. "She is drawing arrows on a seating chart like that proves intent." Tiana looked at him calmly. "No, it proves opportunity. Intent is in the messages." The room froze. Grant's mouth closed. Rebecca's eyes sharpened. "What messages?" Tiana reached into the pocket of her apron and removed a small notepad, the kind servers used for orders. From between the pages, she pulled a handwritten table rotation slip and a phone number copied twice. "Mr. Mercer told me to throw away the rotation slips after close. I kept this one because the number on it matched the number Table 7 gave the hostess when he made a same-day reservation." Peter checked the tablet, then swallowed. "It matches," Tiana continued. "And that number texted the restaurant line at 7:58 asking if the blue booth was confirmed." Rebecca's fingers moved over the tablet. "The blue booth is Mr. Whitlock's table." Grant whispered. "Enough." It was not command anymore. It was fear. Tiana turned toward Adrian. "They needed you at that booth, me in that section, the camera down, and the band break mistimed. If anything happened, the story would be simple. A distracted waitress missed the signs. A black woman already called dramatic by her manager becomes the easiest explanation in the room." Evelyn Hart lowered her gaze, shame finally replacing superiority. Around Tiana, the staff stood straighter. Peter, Marissa the hostess, the stage manager, even the saxophone player, still holding his instrument, watched her with quiet respect. Adrian finally spoke, his voice low and even. "Miss Brooks did not create panic. She prevented it from having a script." Rebecca looked at Grant. "All messages to the restaurant line are now preserved. So are seating edits, camera status changes, and staff assignments." Grant's face told the truth before the files could. Tiana folded the reservation sheet once and placed it beside the tablet. Her hands still trembled, but not from doubt. "You kept calling me too observant," she said to Grant. "You were right." The room went silent, and for the first time all night, being seen was not her punishment. It was her proof. Rebecca Shaw did not rush when she opened the message archive from the Blue Lantern's restaurant line. She placed the tablet on the edge of the host's stand where the blue-gold light could catch the screen, and the room seemed to understand that whatever appeared there would not be rumor, nerves, or imagination. It would be a record. Grant Mercer stared at the tablet as if silence might still protect him. Tiana Brooks stood beside the reservation sheets with her apron smooth, her posture steady, and her eyes clear in a room that had spent years teaching women like her to lower them. The first message appeared at 7:58. "Blue booth confirmed?" Peter read it aloud in a voice that trembled once, then steadied. The number matched Table 7. The second message came from Grant's manager profile at 8:03. "Confirmed. Server will be Brooks." Rebecca looked up. No one spoke. The jazz stage had gone quiet, the musicians holding their instruments like witnesses. Adrian Whitlock's pale face remained unreadable, but the stillness around him had become heavier, colder, impossible to ignore. Grant tried to laugh, but the sound broke before it became anything useful. That could mean anything. Tiana looked at him. "It means you knew my assignment before you changed the chart." Rebecca swiped to the next file. Security note, 8:10. Hallway camera maintenance mode. Authorized by manager profile. Peter whispered, "That was you." Grant turned sharply. "You do not know what you are talking about." But Peter did not shrink this time. I know the system logs. Evelyn Hart, who had once called Tiana anxious, sat with both hands folded in her lap, her diamonds suddenly quiet against her skin. The confidence of the room had shifted away from the people who purchased respect and toward the black woman who had earned it under pressure. Rebecca opened another message. It was from the same number tied to table 7. Band break still 11? Grant's profile replied, close enough. Floor noise will cover transition. A slow chill moved through the restaurant. Nothing violent had happened in front of them. Nothing chaotic, nothing dramatic in the way Grant had tried to define Tiana's fear. But the intention was there, clean and ugly, written in plain words by people who thought staff systems were private hiding places. Adrian finally spoke. Continue. Rebecca did. Another preserved note appeared, this one sent from Grant to an unknown contact. If this goes wrong, Waitress missed protocol. She already has warnings. The sentence sat on the screen like a handprint. Tiana felt the room tilt, then right itself beneath her feet. She had known she was being positioned, but seeing it written stripped the last excuse from the air. Grant had not only dismissed her, he had prepared to use her. Her job title, her race, her old write-ups, her reputation as too observant, all of it had been arranged into a story that could bury her if the night went bad. For the first time, Evelyn Hart stood. Her voice was smaller than before. Miss Brooks, she said, I was wrong. Tiana did not look away from the screen. Yes, ma'am. You were. No cruelty. No triumph. Just truth, sharp enough on its own. The apology hung there, inadequate but necessary. Around the dining room, guests who had laughed politely at Grant's remarks now avoided his eyes. Marissa, the hostess, stepped beside Peter. He told me to take my break early, she said. He said Tiana could handle VIP alone. The stage manager added. He changed the break note on the tablet. Luis, a busser who had stayed silent all night, lifted his chin. And he told us not to interrupt Miss Brooks when she was near the blue booth. One by one, the room Grant had managed through fear began returning his secrets to him. The 5 men no longer looked like customers. They looked like a plan that had lost its script. One reached for his phone, then stopped when Rebecca calmly said, all related communications are now under preservation notice. Adrian did not move toward them. He did not need to. His investment representative was already speaking with lawful security and the proper authorities outside the dining room, keeping the process clean, documented, and visible. Grant's voice dropped to a whisper. You have no idea what you are interfering with. Adrian turned to him slowly. I know exactly what I am interfering with. His gaze moved to Tiana, and the room followed it. A lie built around a woman you thought no one would believe. Grant looked at Tiana then, really looked at her, not as staff, not as a problem, not as a disposable name on a schedule, but as the person who had seen the whole machine while carrying water through candlelight. Tiana folded the reservation sheet and placed it beside the tablet. You kept calling me dramatic, she said. But drama is what people create when they want truth to look unstable. The room went silent. This time, no one mistook her calm for fear. After the messages appeared on the tablet, the Blue Lantern no longer felt like a restaurant waiting for service to resume. It felt like a room waking up from a spell it had helped cast. The candles still glowed inside blue glass holders. The brass lamps still warmed the velvet booths, and the untouched water glasses still sat in front of the 5 men who had arrived pretending not to know one another. But the center of the room had moved. It was no longer Adrian Whitlock's corner booth, or Grant Mercer's host stand, or Evelyn Hart's polished table near the stage. It was Tiana Brooks standing beside the reservation sheets, the woman they had called too observant, too anxious, too dramatic, now holding the entire night together by details everyone else had missed. Marissa came first, stepping out from behind the host's stand with her hands clasped tightly in front of her apron. I should have said something when he changed your section, she whispered. Tiana turned to her, and there was no blame in her face. You were scared. Marissa nodded, eyes wet. So were you. Tiana let that truth sit between them. Yes, but scared does not mean wrong. Luis stood closer next, then the stage manager, then Peter, each of them no longer looking through her or around her, but at her, with the kind of respect that does not ask permission from management. Evelyn Hart remained standing near her table, older and smaller beneath the diamonds than she had looked an hour earlier. Miss Brooks, she said carefully, I mistook composure for attitude. Tiana looked at her for a long second. The apology was not enough to erase the insult, but dignity did not require cruelty in return. Most people do when it comes from someone they already decided not to respect, she said. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Adrian stayed silent near the corner booth, his navy suit dark against the blue lantern light, his pale face unreadable, his presence still shaping the room without owning it. Rebecca Shaw coordinated with lawful security and the proper authorities through calm, documented channels, preserving the messages, camera logs, reservation edits, and staff statements. No shouting, no spectacle, no need for fear to become performance. Tiana watched the 5 men cooperate under the weight of procedure, their confidence replaced by the quiet panic of people whose plan had become paperwork. Grant stood apart from everyone now, stripped of the easy authority that had once made employees flinch. The staff did not crowd him. They did not need to. The truth had done what anger could not. Rebecca approached Tiana with a tablet. Miss Brooks, your timeline matches every available record so far. We will need a formal statement, and with your permission, we would like you to help reconstruct the floor sequence for the review. Tiana looked at the tablet, then at the room she had carried in her head all night. She thought of the classes she had left unfinished, the textbooks still boxed in her closet, the professor who once told her she had the mind of an investigator, the manager who spent months trying to convince her that same mind was a problem. I can do that, she said. Adrian finally stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. You read the room better than the people paid to protect it. Tiana met his eyes. Because I was never allowed to stop reading rooms. Something in his expression shifted, almost invisible, but real. Not pity. Recognition. Then the room owes you more than thanks. Rebecca added. The ownership review includes guest safety and floor standards. A consultant role can be arranged while the investigation continues. Tiana heard the words, but she did not reach for them quickly. She looked first at Marissa, Luis, Peter, the band, the servers, the people who now understood that her courage had protected more than one powerful man. Only if staff voices are included, she said. Not filtered through management. Not rewritten to sound polite. Adrian's answer was immediate. Done. The word carried the weight of a signed contract. Tiana stood taller beneath the blue light, still in her waitress uniform, still holding the folded reservation sheet, no longer reduced by either. She had not become fearless. She had become believed. And for a woman the room once tried to shrink into silence. That was the first real safety she had felt all night. By 2:17 in the morning, the blue lantern had stopped pretending the night could be folded back into normal. The 5 men who had arrived separately now sat under separate pools of blue-gold light, each one giving statements through the proper channels, their polished confidence replaced by the pale patience of people who had discovered that a quiet room can become a courtroom when the right woman remembers enough. Grant Mercer stood near the host's stand with Rebecca Shaw's preservation notice in front of him, no longer the manager who decided which staff member mattered, but a man reduced to timestamps, message logs, seating edits, and the silence of employees he could no longer intimidate. Tiana Brooks sat at the edge of the empty jazz stage with the folded reservation sheet on her lap, answering questions in a voice that remained steady even when her hands did not. She had reconstructed the entire floor sequence, the camera set to maintenance mode, the altered VIP assignment, the repeated seating phrase, the false band break question, the message that said waitress missed protocol. Every detail had been there, scattered across the room like notes in a song nobody else wanted to hear. She had heard it anyway. Then Peter came from the office carrying the old staff binder, his face drawn with something between shame and urgency. Miss Shaw, he said, there is a section in here that is not on the tablet. Grant lifted his head. Peter. One word. One warning. But Peter did not stop this time. He placed the binder on the stage beside Tiana, and Rebecca opened it carefully. Inside was a printed emergency protocol sheet with handwritten notes in Grant's sharp block letters. Tiana leaned closer, and the room seemed to narrow around the page. Beside the line for incident witness, someone had written her name before her section had ever been changed. Brooks closest to Blue Booth. Already has credibility issues. The final lie was not spoken. It was filed. For a moment, even Adrian Whitlock's cold expression darkened. Evelyn Hart covered her mouth. Marissa whispered, He planned to blame you before anything even happened. Tiana looked at the words until they stopped hurting and started explaining. Every warning, every insult, every time Grant called her dramatic. He had not been reacting to her. He had been preparing the room not to believe her. Adrian stepped forward slowly, his navy suit cutting a dark line through the candlelight, his presence quiet enough to make the truth sound louder. You did not choose her because she was closest, he said to Grant. You made her closest because you thought her dignity would be the easiest thing to question. Grant's face had gone empty. I was protecting the business. Tiana stood, holding the binder open in both hands. No, she said. You were protecting yourself from being seen by someone you trained everyone to overlook. The words settled over him with more force than anger ever could. Rebecca closed the binder. This will be included in the formal report. Mr. Mercer is suspended from all operational duties pending legal review. Staff statements continue without management present. No one applauded. It was better than applause. It was clean. It was final. The 5 men were escorted out through official procedure, their names attached to reports instead of rumors. Grant left through the side hallway, not with power, not with mystery, just a man following instructions in the restaurant he had tried to control. Near dawn, the band returned to the stage. The saxophone player lifted his instrument and played one slow, trembling note that filled the room like breath coming back into a body. Adrian approached Tiana beside the stage, stopping at the edge of the light. Rebecca placed a folder in Tiana's hands. Guest Safety and Floor Standards Consultant. Temporary authority during review. Staff input protected. Her name printed clearly beneath the title. Tiana read it once, then again, as if the paper might disappear if she trusted it too quickly. Why me? She asked. Adrian looked toward the tables, the cameras, the staff standing taller than they had at sunset. Because fear made them careless, he said. Dignity made you precise. He turned toward the front door, already becoming rumor again, a white mafia boss with a code no law could fully explain and a silence that followed him like a shadow. At the threshold, he paused. Miss Brooks, he said without looking back, never let a small man tell you your vision is too much. Then he disappeared into the first gray light of New Orleans morning. Tiana stood on the empty jazz stage with the folder in one hand and the reservation sheet in the other. No longer the waitress they dismissed as dramatic, but the woman whose memory saved the truth from being rewritten. And that night, the woman they called too observant became the reason everyone lived to hear the last song.